Wow. Lee speaks through the organ, and the choir speaks through Lee Greenwood, and my cup is full. It's a great day to be alive. I have a confession to make. I misspoke with the children, and I want to point it out before somebody else points it out to me. Deborah was not a priest. She was a judge. A judge, a military leader, and a prophet. One of three in the Old Testament. Samuel and Moses were the other two. I said the first thing that came out of my silly mouth, and I regret it. My first grade teacher, Mary Arbach, didn't know it at the time, but she played Deborah in a significant but quiet way to me with far-reaching, life-enhancing effects. Mrs. Arbach was like an angel unaware. She noticed early on in first grade that I was going to go naturally with my left hand. So when we had rest time after lunch where we would lay our heads on our desktop and spend 20 minutes quietly, Mrs. Arbach threw me a rubber ball and had me squeeze it with my left hand. In and out, to strengthen the muscles in that hand. If I was going to go naturally with my left hand at a time when educational experts were still advocating that lefties should be switched to right-handed, then I was going to have a strong left hand so I could have good penmanship. Mary Arbach was watching my back. She was looking out for me a long time before I even knew what that meant. Have you ever had anybody say to you, "I'll watch your back"? Or maybe a friend has said, "You know, you shouldn't do that alone. I'll go with you." Or someone else has said, "Please be careful when you deal with that person on that issue. It could be tricky. Why don't you seek some advice from Bill, who has had some experience in that area?" Or a person who cannot physically help out says, "I'm praying for you." All of those situations are good examples of someone watching your back, looking out for you, offering to take care of and with you while you do a difficult task. In other words, I'll watch your back. Now, ordinarily, this offer, "I'll watch your back," is associated with in our mind with military or police actions. We have seen too many action films where one person makes the first move on a closed door or a dark hallway or a minefield towards a hornet's nest of machine guns, and one of his or her companions shouts, "I'll watch your back." However, "I'll watch your back" is a strong offer of faith and support as well. Leonard Sweet, in his book, 11 Indispensable Relationships You Can't Be Without, says, "Everyone who has made a dent or a difference for God or good in history has had protectors. People who have said to them, 'I've got your back.'" A young Augustinian friar named Martin Luther was only 34 when he posted his 95 Theses to the chapel door at Wittenberg. When the religious establishment lashed back, Friedrich, the Elector of Saxony, took Luther aside and said, "Marty, I've got your back." Can you imagine what it might have been like for Luther to be able to say, "Somebody's actually got my back"? Who is providing cover for you? That's your Deborah. In the history of Israel, only 3 people combined the offices of prophet, judge, and military leader: Moses, Samuel, and Deborah. When you add to the mix her ability as a poet, as revealed in the victory duet, the Song of Deborah in Judges 5, she sang with Barak, the oldest extant Hebrew poem and one of the earliest writings in the Hebrew scriptures. This fiery spirit is in a category all by herself. Let's face it, we all need a Deborah, someone who watches our back, who has our best interests in mind and heart and even prayer when we go to do difficult tasks. The longer I live, the more I can't escape some of the most dire consequences of being human. The deterioration of the body, the cruelty of illnesses, sometimes the weakening of the mind, the inevitability of death, and the absolute mess people make of themselves and each other. And Sweet says, there are many kinds of monsters, many of them shaped like men and women. The world is full of people who like nothing better than to kill. Your reputation, your spirit, your mission. If your life is on a mission for good and God, you'll be the first to be fired on by enemies and friends. It doesn't matter how good you are. You're going to get criticism, and it usually comes via the back door. And it's going to be more than just backbiting. It's going to be backstabbing or worse. If you recall, it was the religious establishment that told Jesus his healing was the work of the devil. Now, there are certain professions, according to Sweet, that are high in critical fiber. Politics, ministry, and the arts, acting especially. Sweet says the church seems to be especially rampant with and flamboyant about its friendly fire. Here's Leonard Sweet again. I'm not necessarily saying that the church is the only army that shoots its own wounded. That's just an old joke. But the church does seem to have more than its share of wounded warriors. And they're not laughing. It's one thing to beat a dead horse. It's another to beat a live one. The church can beat both with equal single-mindedness. There is an Arabic proverb that says, a falling camel attracts many knives. For leaders in the church today, the rear guard is needed for protection more than ever. Ever since so much of the church is opposed to advancing and is clumped together at your rear, where all this mass of folks sees is the back of the leader. Behavioral geneticists call the predisposition to be crabby, critical, and irritable negative affectivity. When you're not where you're supposed to be, when the church digs in its heels or brings up the rear, rather than positions itself in the vanguard of change, negative affectivity rears its hooting head. In the Bible, Deborah covered Barak's back so he could fight against the armies of the Canaanites. If you are a right-handed quarterback, one of your most trusted allies is the left tackle in the offensive line. This is your blind side. And the best defensive linemen are put there to intimidate the quarterback and make reads and progressions. The success of every right-handed quarterback is a left tackle named Deborah, who has his back. Tell some of those linemen that I don't want to do that. Now, all the way through my ministry, I can pick out my Deborahs. Those lay leaders who worked on a team with me and watched my back. They never led me to my own devices, even when I thought I was intended to be a hero or a sacrificial lamb or a savior. I was pretty silly at times, not always owning up to the reality that all of those roles had already been done before, and I was not going to be effective to anyone, and certainly not to leadership and ministry, if I followed any of those routes. These lay leaders would demonstrate their Deborah qualities by timely gifts to me and to the ministry we shared. They knew instinctively that a congregation, a church, a conference, a ministry wasn't going to be faithful or successful or productive or healthy or effective or functional, whatever descriptive word you prefer to use, if the main shepherd, the pastoral leader, the person called to be the out in front leader of the congregation or the ministry, was experienced as a wounded, broken human being. So these good and faithful and capable and creative, prescient people would go out of their way to look out for me. They knew that a pastoral leader, a leader in the church, became a real easy target. I'm not ashamed of my size. I've lived with it for a long time. I've told congregations and people in ministry settings with me over the years that I can be the biggest moving target around.